At midnight, the maternity center was eerily quiet. Nurse supervisor Chinling was busy preparing in her office. Her father was coming tonight, and it had been a long time since they had last met. She couldn't hide her excitement. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock on the door, like the sound of a bronze bell from the underworld, echoing in the small room. Nurse supervisor Chinling furrowed her brow, stood up, and walked to the door. As she turned the handle, the new nursery nurse rushed in. She was about to scold the nurse, but was immediately silenced by the icy water of fear. Something's wrong. A baby is missing. What? Chinling's mind exploded. This maternity center had tight security. How could a baby just vanish? Unless it was related to that recent incident. But surely their luck wouldn't be that bad, she reassured herself in her mind. Have you searched everywhere? Chinling stared at the new nurse, suspecting that they had carelessly left the baby somewhere. We've looked. It was there, then it just disappeared. The nurse turned in circles, panicking and incoherent. Disappeared? Chinling looked at her in disbelief, but now wasn't the time to dwell on the choice of words. The sound of police sirens grew nearer, and it seemed the police were already on their way. The center's management was out of town this week, and she and the caretaker were acting as the leads. She quickly called the caretaker to explain the situation, instructed the security staff to seal the exits, and ordered all employees to remain at their posts and not leave. Nurse supervisor, you need to check on the mother. She's about to break down. Another nurse rushed in, adding more fuel to the fire. What a cursed night. Chinling locked away the things she had been preparing in the safe and followed the nurse to the mother's room. As they walked down the corridor, she could hear the mother's piercing cries, so heartbreaking that they seemed to take away everyone's soul. 616. Chinling glanced at the room number. In the West, it was considered an unlucky number, reminding her of the Jersey Devil that preyed on children. Entering the room, she saw the mother sitting on the floor, wailing uncontrollably. The warmth from the room's heater seemed to burn her sorrow unbearably. One of the older nurses was patting her shoulder, trying to comfort her, while another stood helplessly. Hey, come here. Chinling whispered to the dazed nurse. She couldn't remember her name. She didn't bother to memorize the names of the nursery staff. To her, they were just the gears that kept the center running. The nurse, a girl in her 20s with a round, doe-like face, walked timidly to Chinling. Doe softly explained what had happened. The mother's name was Yu Qian. She had just been brought to the center from the hospital at noon. During the day, she and the baby had stayed in the room. At 10 p.m., the mother decided to rest and asked the nurse to take the baby to the nursery. She woke up at midnight, wanting to feed the baby, called for the baby to be brought to her, and when she went to push the stroller, she found the baby was gone. Disappeared? Chinling once again recalled that word. The maternity center had baby nurseries on both the 6th and 7th floors, where babies from that floor were gathered for management. The nursery walls were made of transparent glass, and each baby had its designated crib. There were also surveillance cameras in the nursery and hallway. How could a baby just vanish like that? The words Jersey Devil surfaced in her mind once again, sending a chill down her spine. This wasn't just a mythical creature from American folklore that preyed on children. It was also the code name for a nationwide crime ring behind a string of recent baby thefts. Over the past few months, newborns had gone missing from maternity centers all across the country. Despite the center's tight security, the criminals kept succeeding, and the public had started calling them the Jersey Devil. Even when Chinling first came to work here as nurse supervisor, a baby had gone missing, and people suspected the Jersey Devil was behind it. The maternity center's owner had used his connections to suppress media coverage of the incident. Though the police had started an investigation and identified a suspect, the suspect died in a sudden car accident, the trail went cold, and the investigation ended in failure. Just then, a group of police officers entered. The leading officer, his brow furrowed and his face serious, showed his badge and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Hello, my name is He. From now on, I'll be in charge of this case." When Officer He received the call, his 1-year-old son, Chestnut, hadn't yet fallen asleep. The little guy was using his trophy as a weapon, smashing anything he didn't like. Such an active night owl, he was nothing like he was when he was young. Chestnut wasn't his biological son. After more than 10 years of marriage, his wife still hadn't been able to get pregnant. Over the years, this child that never appeared had become an issue not only for the freshness of their marriage, but also for its preservation. So, he turned to a distant relative for help, arranging to adopt an orphan from a rural area. The relative said the child had been abandoned and had no identity documents. He had once suspected the child might have been trafficked. As a law enforcement officer, his instincts told him to investigate the child's background. But when he held the angelic baby and was melted by his innocent gaze, all his doubts were thrown into hell. At that moment, Chestnut was his son, and there was no question about it. While driving, his subordinate briefed him on the situation. Another baby had been stolen, and it was from the same maternity center. The previous case had occurred 3 months ago, and though it wasn't his responsibility at the time, he had heard about it. Back then, the surveillance footage had been overwritten, and the initial suspect had been a security guard, but he died suddenly in a car accident, which was suspected to have been murder to silence him. The lead went cold. The officer in charge of the case was on vacation, so he had taken over. These human traffickers were truly despicable. In the past, they had only targeted children in parks or on the streets, but now their reach had extended into secure maternity centers. Where would they strike next? A hospital? A school? Their methods were so sophisticated, and they kept succeeding. The thought that one day Chestnut could be stolen made he shudder. He floored the gas pedal and sped toward the maternity center. The large sign on the rooftop of the center was lit, watching over the city in the dark. Upon reaching the 6th floor where the missing baby had been last seen, he noticed a group of staff standing in the room. One middle-aged woman appeared to be in charge. He introduced himself, requested a private room to take statements, and the interrogation began. The first to be questioned was a customer service representative, a tall, well-groomed woman with nervousness flashing in her eyes. She explained that she was responsible for maintaining contact with the mothers in the center's chat group, checking on their pregnancy and delivery progress. Today, she had also been the one to pick up the mother and bring her to the maternity center. Afterward, she arranged for a nursery nurse to take over the baby. She had also helped the mother bathe, change clothes, and introduce the room's facilities, as well as the center's rules and contract. "How was the baby at that time?" "Officer," he asked, his sharp eyes glued to her face, trying to find any inconsistencies. He had a small notebook on the table to jot down notes. "The baby was sleeping soundly. I just glanced at him and saw no issues. I was mainly responsible for the mother's needs, while the nurse was caring for the baby." Soon, the nursery nurse, Doe, took a seat in front of he. "The baby was still asleep when I brought him to the room," she tried to recall. "The mother was in the bathroom and I registered the baby's information, height, weight, that kind of thing. When the mother came out, I asked her about the baby." "What did you ask?" "Things like whether the baby had any birthmarks, whether the hospital had given jaundice medication, and whether the baby was breastfed or formula-fed. Then the mother said she wanted to rest with the baby, so we all left." "And then?" "Officer," he sat up straighter, now focusing on the crucial details. "At 10 o'clock, the mother called the nursery and asked us to bring the baby over. I took the stroller to the nursery. Then, in the middle of the night, the mother called again, asking to see the baby. I went to push the stroller, but the baby was gone." "How could no one have noticed for so long?" he asked. At that moment, his subordinate handed him a tablet, which showed the surveillance footage of the 6th floor corridor, tracking the baby's journey from the mother's room to the nursery. After watching it, he saw several suspicious details. He placed the tablet on the table. The footage showed Doe pushing the stroller out of the room. Why was the stroller covered with a cloth? "Our hallways are lit with spotlights," the head nurse interjected. "To prevent the light from directly hitting the baby's eyes, we always cover the stroller with a towel when moving the babies in and out of the rooms." "Did you confirm the baby's condition at that time?" He turned to the head nurse, then looked back at Doe.
Yes.
When I left, the baby was sleeping soundly. But the surveillance footage didn't show the baby's face in the stroller, and he mentally noted this. He continued the questioning. I see you push the stroller to here. He pointed at another part of the nursery's footage. But the stroller wasn't placed in the center of the room, as it should be. It was placed near the cabinet, next to several other strollers. In the footage, it's conveniently blocked by the cabinet. That's because every new baby has to be isolated in another small nursery on the 7th floor to prevent possible infections, Doe explained. But tonight, the water pipes in the 7th floor nursery broke and couldn't be used, so I had to leave the stroller there temporarily. He looked at the head nurse, who nodded in confirmation, explaining that the repairman wouldn't arrive until the next morning. He asked a few more questions, and the responses were all consistent. The situation didn't look good. While the stroller had been in a blind spot of the cameras, the staff had been busy with their duties, occasionally passing by to change diapers and feed the babies. No one had the opportunity to hide or take the baby, and the nursery's door was secured with a fingerprint lock. No unauthorized persons had entered. Did the surveillance cameras at the entrances and exits of the maternity center and on the street capture anything? He asked his subordinate. His subordinate confirmed that there had been no movement at any of the entrances during the time of the incident. If that's the case, the baby must still be in the center. He immediately ordered a thorough search of the entire building. Every room must be checked. No matter where the criminal had hidden the baby would certainly cry from hunger after such a long time without feeding. They would follow the sound to find it. But if the criminal sedated the baby wouldn't cry, making it much harder to find. The head nurse voiced her concern upon hearing his plan. I'll arrange for a nursery nurse to guide you, in case any corners are missed. She was right. The place was now crawling with police, and the criminal wouldn't dare make a move. But if they delayed too long, the baby might die from hunger or suffocation. Time was of the essence. He agreed to the head nurse's plan, and the officers immediately got to work. He had the head nurse take him to a place, the 7th floor nursery, which had been perfectly fine until tonight, but now it was unusable. In what time did the water pipes break? Officer, he asked Chen-Ling in the elevator. Around 5 or 6 in the evening, Chen-Ling replied, activating the elevator with her fingerprint. There were 2 regular elevators for guests and 1 dedicated to the nursery, which went directly to the upper and lower nursery rooms, accessible only by staff. If someone were trying to secretly transport a baby, using this elevator would be much less risky. Officer, he didn't say anything. He simply watched the numbers on the elevator display as if trying to find some clue hidden within. When they reached the 7th floor, Chen-Ling opened the nursery door. This room was half the size of the one downstairs. The water on the floor had already been wiped clean, and all the cribs had been moved to one side, now squeezed together with soothing chairs, refrigerators, and other equipment. She used a key to open a cabinet beneath a sink. She had already turned off the water valve and sealed the break with waterproof tape. Officer, he pulled out a flashlight from his pocket, tore the tape off, and carefully examined the crack. After half a minute, he stood up. Did you find anything? Chen-Ling asked with concern. Who normally has access to this cabinet? He didn't directly answer her question, still carefully inspecting every corner of the room. Besides me and the housekeeper, there's the plumber, she explained. The maternity center hired a plumber, a man in his 40s. He was supposed to be working today, but this morning he said a relative had passed away and he had to go back. The replacement was also out of town, so I had to call in a temporary plumber who will come tomorrow to fix it. What about the surveillance cameras here? They broke down some time ago, and we haven't had a chance to fix them. Didn't the mothers stay in the center get to see the baby's surveillance footage on the TV? They only see the footage downstairs. The upstairs cameras are not available for public viewing because... The head nurse hesitated for a few seconds. The environment here isn't ideal, and we lack enough staff. We can't really take proper care of each baby, especially when it comes to soothing crying babies right away. Officer, he furrowed his brow, his hands in his pockets as he paced back and forth, seemingly deep in thought. Chen-Ling fell silent, standing there, waiting for his next instructions. "The perpetrator is most likely one of the nursery staff," he said firmly. "I need you to do something for me. Please gather all the personnel files, especially for those who joined in the past 3 months, and give them to my team." "Okay, I'll ask HR to send them over." "Then, when you go back to the nursery on the 6th floor, talk to all the nursery workers. They won't be as wary of you as they are of us. You might uncover information we've missed." Was this going to be like a real-life game of werewolf? Chun-Ling's heart pounded in her chest. She met his unquestionable gaze, feeling that she had no choice but to accept the task. After making the call to HR to arrange for the personnel files, she returned to the nursery. Everyone was busy, as usual, but the tense atmosphere was palpable. It was like a T-1000 frozen by liquid nitrogen. One light touch, and it would shatter, yet it wouldn't disappear. With the right temperature, it would return to threaten everyone again. She first approached the shift leader, who was sitting on a sofa, feeding a baby. How did everyone do today? This was her first time acting as a detective, so she tried her best to sound casual. "Everyone is really worried about the baby, afraid that their negligence will be investigated by the police." The shift leader looked older than the others, but her eyes were full of anxiety. "Not about now, but earlier today. Did you notice anything unusual?" "Let me think. At lunch, Xiaoli didn't eat a hamburger. She said she was dieting and had a salad." Xiaohi complained of an upset stomach and ran to the restroom several times. Sister Zhang said her son graduated from university and was looking for a girlfriend, and asked if anyone here was still single. Xiaohi went to the bathroom several times. Could that be related to the case? She silently noted down this possible clue in her mind. What about her? Chun-Ling pointed at the nearby Do, who was reclining at a table, propping her head up and resting her eyes. "I've thought about her too, since she was the last one to have contact with the baby. But nothing seemed off. If I had to say anything, it's just that she seemed a little fatter today." Chun-Ling then spoke to the other staff members. Aside from a few vague suspects, she didn't get any solid leads. After all, each nursery worker was responsible for the care of 4 or 5 babies, dealing with feeding, diaper changes, and sleep, making it nearly impossible for anyone to go unnoticed. They were also under constant surveillance, with cameras even inside the mother's rooms, so they couldn't afford to slack off. However, one nursery worker mentioned that while she was changing the diaper of another baby, she saw the missing baby's stroller covered with a bath towel. She tried to lift the towel to check, but Do stopped her. "Did you see the baby?" "Yes, the baby was sleeping soundly. I asked why the stroller was covered, and she said the mother requested it because the light would wake the baby. I saw nothing wrong with the baby, and since she was in charge, I didn't interfere. I didn't expect something would happen." Chun-Ling pondered. If Officer He was right and the perpetrator was among the nursery staff, she hadn't found anyone with a clear motive for the crime. The most important thing was that she had also seen the surveillance footage. Everyone had been performing their duties, and it seemed impossible for anyone to have taken the baby. Could Officer He's judgment be wrong? Earlier, she had wondered whether the baby had gone missing before reaching the nursery, but according to the statement from the other nursery worker, the baby had definitely disappeared inside the nursery. So, how did the baby vanish? Who else but the nursery staff had the chance to act? Chun-Ling felt like her mind was tangled up like a ball of yarn that a cat had played with. It seemed like she wasn't cut out to be a detective. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from her father, so she stepped into the bathroom to read it. She replied, "Sorry, I won't be able to make it tonight. This is urgent. You must come." Her father's tone left no room for argument. She sighed. It seemed that no matter what, she would have to find time to meet her father. In her heart, her father was like the sun, high above, radiating warmth and light. Though he wasn't her biological father, she considered him even closer than her real parents. As for her biological family, she had long severed ties with them. However, there was something else on her mind. Earlier, when Officer He made a call, she caught a glimpse of his phone wallpaper. It was a photo of his son. His son. She felt like she had seen him somewhere before. Officer, he instructed his subordinates to prioritize investigating the plumber, who had coincidentally returned to his hometown. His name was Yang, and everyone called him Old Yang. His team reported that Old Yang's family hadn't suffered a death, and he hadn't left the city. He was still at home. Bring him in immediately. Officer, he slammed his hand on the table. He had just spoken with the head nurse, who had relayed the conversations she'd had with the nursery staff. There was nothing of particular interest in the information. But now, with this new lead, he was determined to use it to expose the true criminal. When Old Yang was brought into the temporary interrogation room, his eyes were filled with fear, like a mouse trapped in a mousetrap. He had good reason to be scared. Officer, he was brimming with excitement as he questioned him about why he had lied about his leave, asking if he knew what had happened at the maternity center that night. I don't know what you're talking about, Old Yang replied nervously. He was from Sichuan, small in stature, with a balding head that gleamed like a boiled egg under the light. Someone gave me 3,000 yuan and told me to take the day off, so I made up an excuse. One of the water pipes on the 7th floor nursery was coated with something like sulfuric acid, corroded, and caused a leak that made it unusable. You just so happened to take the day off when there was no one else available, and as a result, a baby that was supposed to be placed on the 7th floor ended up missing on the 6th floor. You, sir, are an accomplice in this child trafficking case, and you'll be going to jail. Don't say nonsense. I really don't know anything about it. Old Yang pounded the table in panic. I just took a day off. How am I involved in human trafficking? Who gave you the money? I don't know. Still hiding something? Call your family, say goodbye, and get ready for jail. I told you, don't arrest me. Old Yang finally cracked. He confessed that he had received an anonymous phone call the night before. The caller asked him to take the day off and promised him 3,000 yuan. The voice had been altered, so he couldn't tell who it was, but the money had been instantly transferred to his account. Though he had some doubts, he had recently lost money gambling and figured the extra cash would help. He didn't think anything bad would happen. Officer, he immediately ordered his subordinates to take Old Yang for a detailed statement and to investigate the source of the transfer. The feedback came in quickly. The money had been transferred from an anonymous overseas account, but tracing the source would take some time. Given the meticulous planning behind this, Officer, he was now more certain than ever that this was the work of the Jersey Devil. Although they had figured out how the baby was moved from the 7th to the 6th floor, the method by which the baby disappeared remained a mystery. His subordinates had thoroughly searched the 6th floor nursery, inspecting every space and item, but nothing unusual had been found. The nursery staff under surveillance had shown no suspicious behavior. The criminal must have used some method that Officer, he had overlooked. He decided to visit the victim. His subordinates had already taken her statement, which matched the account given by the nursery staff, but at that time, she had been very emotional. He hoped that now, with some time passed, she might be able to recall more details. When Officer, he met Mrs. Yu, she was lying on the bed, her body leaning against a large rabbit-stuffed toy. She was staring blankly at the ceiling, as if hoping for a colorful wormhole to appear and bring her baby back. Officer, he briefly scanned the room. On the table were a sterilizer, a bottle warmer, tissue boxes, and an unwashed bottle with dried milk stains inside. The head nurse had told him that Mrs. Yu hadn't been lactating yet and had been feeding her baby formula. They had arranged for a lactation consultant to assist her in the next few days, but it seemed like that wouldn't be necessary anymore. The baby stroller, still in the room, held only a small pillow, a little blanket, and black and red vision training cards for babies. Forensic personnel had found only Mrs. Yu's and the nursery worker, Doe's, fingerprints on them. No traces of anyone else. I'm sorry, I have a few questions. Officer, he began. He understood that asking her to recall the night her child went missing was cruel. He could empathize with her pain. If anyone had taken his child, he would stop at nothing to find the culprit, no matter where they were. He asked Mrs. Yu about the events before and after the incident. She responded mechanically, and her answers didn't differ much from her previous statement. However, one small detail caught Officer He's attention. Are you sure that after you had a late-night snack, you felt really tired, and that's when you called someone to come take your baby?
Yes.
I used to be a night owl, couldn't fall asleep until after midnight. But after having the baby, my health hasn't been the same. Officer, he carefully jotted down the detail. It seemed insignificant at first, but his intuition told him this was a clue worth investigating further. He sent a message to his subordinates to verify something, then headed to the housekeeper's office. The housekeeper was a short, plump, middle-aged woman, and her thick black-framed glasses made her look like a cartoon character. Like the head nurse, she was stressed, juggling work and handling documents. When she saw Officer He enter, she immediately asked about the investigation. "We're still investigating," Officer He replied, holding up a brochure for the maternity center he had grabbed from the hallway. "Do you prepare all the meals in-house?" The housekeeper smiled lightly and shrugged. "It's just marketing. Clients want healthy, safe meals, but with so many people, we can't make everything ourselves. Some of the meals are pre-made for convenience, but we do ensure food safety and cleanliness." "What was the late-night snack tonight?" "Let me check." The housekeeper flipped through a sheet of paper on the desk, which listed the meals for the week. It was braised duck with noodles, a small plate of cherry tomatoes, and a small cake. "How many people are responsible for delivering the meals?"
5.
One for each floor. They use a large delivery cart to bring meals to each room, then collect the trays after half an hour. "Do the meals have room numbers on them?" "Yes, because some clients purchase different packages, so their meals are different." Now, Officer He had a clearer idea. Since the meals were labeled with room numbers, the perpetrator could have laced the food with sleeping pills or tranquilizers. After Mrs. Yu fell asleep, she would have no reason to check on the baby and would likely send the child to the nursery, giving the criminal enough time to act without being disturbed. The used dishes had already been collected and washed, and the food scraps had all been mixed together, making it impossible to analyze. However, Officer He had already arranged for Mrs. Yu to undergo a blood test. He was confident they would find traces of a sedative or sleeping pill in her system. He had also conducted background checks on all the staff, reviewing their movements over the past month. Thanks to the power of big data, which keeps track of everyone's movements, Officer He was able to gather detailed information. Fong Wen, the delivery worker on the 6th floor, had worked at the maternity center for 2 years. 6 months ago, she had begun seeing a doctor regularly for insomnia, and Officer He was certain she must be in possession of sleeping pills. With this new information, the entire chain of the crime became clear. Someone had sabotaged the water pipe in the 7th floor nursery, and the plumber had been redirected, ensuring the baby would be moved to the 6th floor. Then Fong Wen drugged the food, causing the baby to be taken to the nursery, where one of the nursery workers took the baby. After that, another person removed the baby from the maternity center. So, how many people in the maternity center were involved in this crime? If Fong Wen was the one who drugged the food, then who was responsible for sabotaging the water pipe and stealing the baby? And the ultimate mystery, how did the baby disappear right under the watchful eyes of the surveillance cameras? While he continued to think through the case, a report arrived on his phone from his subordinate. As soon as he saw it, his disbelief was overwhelming. There were no traces of any sedatives or similar drugs in Mrs. Yu's blood. This meant that Fong Wen wasn't involved after all. His carefully constructed theory had just been shattered into pieces. Did Mrs. Yu's decision to send the baby to the nursery after falling asleep happen randomly? How did the perpetrators seize this opportunity to commit the crime? What exactly was their method? Officer He closed his eyes, imagining the baby lying quietly in the stroller, and then, like a magician, someone covered it with a cloth. With a swift shake, the baby disappeared, like smoke evaporating into thin air. Unless, he suddenly had a bold thought. Just like a magic trick, the eyes can be deceived, whether it's in the surveillance footage or what the witnesses saw. The answer to this mystery might be much simpler than he initially thought. He quickly reviewed all the gathered information in his mind, replaying everything he had seen that night. Suddenly, he caught a faint, subtle sense of discord, so minor it was nearly imperceptible, like a tiny crack on a dam. He grabbed an iron rod, wedging it into the small crack and hammering it in forcefully, again and again. The crack slowly widened, growing into a massive spiderweb. With one more push, the whole dam would collapse. "You need to investigate one more thing," he called his subordinate. "Do it quickly." After giving the order, he sat back in his chair and gazed out the window at the distant sky. The horizon was tinged with a faint light, like a corpse hidden in the night. It wouldn't be long before the truth was fully revealed. After hanging up the phone with Officer He, Chenling felt a sense of regret. After hearing her recount the questioning in the nursery, Officer He hadn't said much, but from his silent tone, she could tell he was stuck in a deadlock, unable to find a breakthrough. She still hoped the case would be solved, but with only 20 minutes left before meeting her father, she had to hurry. She destroyed all documents related to herself in the office, and then went to the nursery. After a night of tension, everyone had relaxed a little. Aside from 2 or 3 caregivers who were feeding the babies, the rest were resting on the nearby sofas. The time before the shift change was when everyone was at their most exhausted, making it the perfect moment to act. Just then, the phone on the wall rang, and Chenling went over to pick it up. "Okay, I'll send the baby over right away." She pushed the stroller marked with 625 out of the nursery, and the head nurse offered her help. The caregiver feeding the baby on the sofa looked up with a grateful expression. But instead of heading to the mother's room, Chenling took the dedicated elevator and went directly back to her office. The phone call had been part of her self-directed act. Now, the real operation was about to begin. She had another identity. She was the second in command of the Jersey Devil organization. In fact, she had to thank her father, who was the leader of the Jersey Devil. Years ago, her biological parents had sold her to the organization at the age of 6 after accumulating huge gambling debts. The organization's leader, impressed by her intelligence, didn't sell her off but instead adopted her as his goddaughter. He raised her, and when she turned 18, he told her the truth about her origins. Chenling hated her biological parents. She couldn't imagine how parents could abandon their own child for personal gain. The seemingly unbreakable bond of blood was nothing more than a scrap of cloth to them. To her, she had been nothing more than a cheap commodity on a shelf, available for anyone to buy if the price was right. She was grateful to her father, who had treated her like his own, and after he revealed the secrets of the Jersey Devil, she eagerly joined the organization. She underwent rigorous training and used her background in nursing to apply for the position of head nurse at the maternity center, learning about its operations and security systems. She then collaborated with an insider to steal the babies. With repeated success, she quickly became one of the organization's most capable operatives. For her, the Jersey Devil was her true family, and she would sacrifice anything for them. Her father also saw her as his own life. When the police had nearly caught her after her last job at the maternity center, it had been her father who acted first, eliminating the insider and making it look like a traffic accident, saving her from being discovered. That was real family. It wasn't about blood relations or DNA. It was genuine, reciprocal love, the kind that makes someone willing to risk everything for each other in times of life and death. Today was supposed to be the day she delivered a baby, but suddenly the baby from room 616 went missing, and the police arrived, throwing a wrench in her plans. The incident wasn't her doing, and she couldn't understand how that baby could disappear without a trace under the surveillance cameras. Was there another competing gang at the maternity center? But now wasn't the time to dwell on those questions. The babies she had were pre-ordered from Southeast Asia, and they had to be delivered today. They couldn't be smuggled out with the others until 24 hours later. Even though she was carrying out the crime under the watchful eyes of the police, with no insider assistance, she trusted that no matter what happened, her father would always come through for her, just like he always had. She took a syringe from her drawer and injected a sedative into the baby marked 625 to ensure the baby would sleep through the journey. Then she wrapped the baby in a bath towel and carefully placed it in a backpack she had modified. The backpack was shockproof and had breathing holes for the baby. She needed to leave quickly. If the mother woke up and started looking for the baby, her cover would be blown. There was an old iron gate behind the maternity center, and she had the key. It was the same gate she had used to smuggle babies out in the past. Beyond it was a stretch of barren land, with no cameras, making it impossible for the police to trace anything. As she opened the gate, she saw a van waiting for her in the distance. As usual, her father was sitting in the car, waiting to greet her with praise. She felt a surge of joy, looking forward to hearing her father's compliments. As for the fate of these children, she didn't care. Perhaps their biological parents were unworthy, and the children would be better off with families who would cherish them. They might live better lives that way. She was almost to the van when she heard Officer He's voice behind her. Lisa, leaving so early? Chun-Ling froze in shock, stopped in her tracks, and calmly turned around, smiling. Oh, do you know my English name? I've read the personnel files carefully, Officer He said with a strained smile. Where are you headed? Just going home to rest, she replied, taking a step back. Why aren't you going out the front door? Officer, he moved closer. I parked my car over there, just a few steps away. How's the investigation going? Have you found the baby? Sort of. Officer, he tilted his head, glancing at the vast shadows behind her. The way the crime was carried out was truly exquisite. Oh, really? Her curiosity was piqued, but now wasn't the time for him to showcase his theories. She needed to finish what she was doing. The most shocking thing about this case, Officer, he continued, is that a living baby disappeared completely under surveillance, and we can't find any trace of it in the entire maternity center. But if we just uncover one blind spot, everything will fall into place. It's so simple, it's almost unbelievable. That's good. I hope you catch the criminal and find the baby soon, Chun-Ling said, backing away. I have a headache. I'm going to head back now. Actually, we've found both the criminal and the baby. But there's another problem. Officer He's gaze locked onto her, his hand slowly reaching for his waist. I rarely see a woman at work carrying such a large backpack, he said. Chun-Ling smiled slightly. What Officer he didn't know was that she still had an ace up her sleeve. The sound of a gunshot rang out, startling the birds perched on the branches. They flew off into the dawn sky, breaking through the cracks of the rising sun as rays of light began to spill onto the earth. After realizing the truth, Officer, he felt a mix of surprise and helplessness. He hadn't expected the truth to be so brutally clear before him. With a heavy heart, Officer, he returned to Mrs. Yu's room. She was staring out of the window, her eyes fixed on the faint white glow on the horizon, as if it were revealing a long-hidden truth to the world. Officer, have you found the criminal? Mrs. Yu quickly turned her head. I've found him, Officer, he said as he sat down heavily in a chair, his tired body slumping. After a whole night of running around, his body felt like it was falling apart. It seemed like he really was getting old. Who is he? Have you caught him? Mrs. Yu's eyes were wide with hope. You know, I have an adopted son. Although he's not my biological child, I can understand your feelings. If he went missing, I'd be sleepless, desperately searching for him everywhere. Officer, he said, his voice steady. Mrs. Yu didn't understand the point of his words and kept asking about the whereabouts of the criminal. Don't worry, he won't escape. Actually, I've been thinking in the wrong direction, and now that I look back, there are too many clues I missed, Officer, he continued. For example, this unwashed baby bottle, he pointed to the table. As parents, we should always remember to clean the bottle right after feeding, or else bacteria can grow, which could be deadly for a newborn. I was too tired and forgot, Mrs. Yu said softly. Then there's the red-black card in the baby stroller. From what I know, babies from 0 to 3 months should use black and white cards, while red-black cards are for babies aged 3 to 6 months. Since you could buy the cards, you must have planned this out, so this mistake seems odd. Officer, he added. I have black and white cards at home too. I must have picked up the wrong ones out of carelessness. Mrs. Yu nervously gripped the blanket. What does all this have to do with the criminal? When I first came in, you kept asking if we had caught the criminal, not if we had found the child. As a mother whose baby is missing, shouldn't your child always come first? Officer, he asked pointedly. Mrs. Yu fell silent. So, I had someone look into your background. Everything checked out, except your twin sister gave birth 3 months ago at this very maternity center, and then her baby was stolen. Officer, he said, revealing the previous baby theft case. Mrs. Yu lowered her head, staring at the doll beside her, her eyes brimming with tears. However, I saw how you looked when you lost your child. The heart-wrenching despair you felt could never be faked. I think you're not the sister of the stolen baby's mother, but you are the mother herself. You came to this maternity center under the guise of your sister. Officer, he concluded. As Mrs. Yu trembled, Officer, he knew he was right. Once they broke through one blind spot, the whole case unraveled. We also found out that your job is as a prop master on a film set. Considering your identity and profession, and the fact that the baby disappeared mysteriously under surveillance, there's only one possibility. The baby doesn't exist. Officer, he said. Mrs. Yu gasped, wiping tears from her cheek with the back of her hand. It seems I can't hide it from you, she said, her voice trembling. She then confessed everything to Officer He. 3 months ago, her own baby had been stolen from this maternity center. She suspected it was an inside job. However, the police were unable to solve the case due to a lack of evidence. So, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She joined forces with other families whose babies had been stolen and formed a victims' alliance. She arranged for one of the mothers to apply as a nanny at the center. This mother was Mantu. A month later, she disguised herself as her sister and checked into the maternity center as a new mother. Her baby was actually a lifelike doll made of inflatable rubber, which she had crafted herself, so realistic that it could easily be mistaken for a real child. She and Manta staged the baby theft. She used her overseas relative's account to transfer money to the plumber, bribing him to leave. Manta then used a prepared key to open the cabinet and sabotage the water pipes. As for how the baby disappeared, it was when Mantu, seeing no one paying attention, deflated the doll and placed it against her clothing, making it appear as if she had gained some weight, something the group leader had noticed. Her aim was to use this staged incident to make the police reinvestigate and possibly uncover the real criminal. You used a fake case to get us to investigate the real case. I must say, your idea is quite unique, Officer, he said. But you need to understand, what you did is illegal, filing a false report and wasting police resources. I'd be willing to be locked up for life if it meant finding my child. Mrs. Yu suddenly broke down, throwing the doll to the floor. Every night, thinking of my child being in someone else's hands, maybe starving or freezing, or like what they say online, being tortured and turned into a beggar on the street, my heart bleeds. Calm down. Officer, he tried to calm her down. If it were him, he wasn't sure what he would do. But doing this won't change anything. Have you thought about it? We've already investigated everything we could the last time, and even if we investigate again, the result will likely be the same. The person who died was a scapegoat. I've checked, no one left in the last 3 months, so the real criminal is still here. I did this because I don't want another baby to suffer. After so much time, the criminal might have let their guard down, and maybe you can find new clues, Mrs. Yu explained. Officer, he shook his head, indicating there were no new findings, and the fire in her eyes seemed to die out. Why did you choose 10 p.m. for Manta to take the baby? Officer, he casually asked. Is it because the last time was also around that time? Yes, last time we were both exhausted after having a midnight snack, and I had the nanny take the baby then. Was the exhaustion a fake? Officer, he suddenly asked sharply. It was fake. But the last time, I was really exhausted, so I just repeated the same plan, Mrs. Yu replied. Was the delivery person part of your alliance? Officer, he asked quickly.
No.
If Mrs. Yu had been drugged the last time, the criminal was definitely the delivery person, a fish that had slipped through the net last time. They were after new clues. Quick, catch the delivery person. Officer, he grabbed the phone and dialed his subordinates. Make sure to find out who their accomplice is fast. 10 minutes later, his subordinate informed him that the delivery person, Fongwen, had committed suicide by poisoning. Officer, he knew that, like last time, it was the organization's usual tactic of silencing witnesses. But this time, he knew who the real mastermind was. The sound of gunfire rang out, and Officer, he was shot in the left shoulder. He quickly drew his gun from his waist and aimed it at Chenling. "So you have a gun." "I was careless." Officer, he gritted through the pain, his left side curled up in agony. "Anyone in our line of work needs to learn how to protect themselves." Chenling continued to point her gun at Officer He's heart, but she dared not act hastily. She had succeeded in her sneak attack, but in a direct gunfight with the police, she knew she'd likely have even more holes in her body. To protect herself, she took off her backpack and held it tightly against her chest. "My colleagues must have heard the gunshot and are on their way here. You can't escape. Put the backpack down and surrender." "Officer," he said, "it seems my accomplice betrayed me. Otherwise, you wouldn't have discovered me so quickly." "No, actually she's dead, just like last time. But I guessed it was you. I remember you mentioned that the baby might have been given a sedative, but if it were anyone else, they would have considered sleeping pills first. Only someone with a history in human trafficking would know that a sedative works faster and more reliably. Unfortunately, I didn't notice that at the time. After finding out the delivery person was dead, I re-examined the clues and finally locked onto you." "Officer He, I want to ask you, how much do you love your son?" Chenling unveiled her trump card. "What do you mean?" "I know your son. He was stolen by my accomplices in another city a few years ago. If I get caught, all the children I've trafficked will be returned to their parents. Can you bear that?" Chenling noticed the hesitation in Officer He's eyes. She slowly retreated towards the back of his car. "Anyway, you're injured. You can tell your colleagues I escaped, and it'll be believable. As long as I'm alive, you can stay with your son. I'll help you keep this secret." She had retreated to the car, and Officer He was still following, but made no move to stop her. Confident, she holstered her gun and sat in the passenger seat, only to find the driver's seat empty. She looked around in panic, but her father was nowhere to be seen. Where was he? What happened? Before she could process it, 5 or 6 police officers emerged from the back door, and Officer He quickly opened the car door, snatching the backpack from her hands. "Where's my father? He'll save me. Where is he?" As she was handcuffed, Chenling screamed desperately, much like the parents of the lost children calling for their flesh and blood. The boomerang of fate had finally struck its mark. "Your father? The leader of the organization? He never showed up. There are so many police here, do you really think he would risk his life to be by your side? To him, you're just a disposable pawn." "Officer," he said coldly. "No, he wouldn't do this to me. My father wouldn't." Chenling continued to scream in hopeless despair. "You're no different from the murdered security guard or the delivery person." Officer, he pointed to a spot not far behind her. "We found a sniper he arranged for you. You two were just a piece to be sacrificed at any time." That unshot bullet seemed to pierce her heart. Chenling's faith collapsed in an instant. The love she thought she had from her family was nothing but a prison, and once it had served its purpose, it would be cast into the endless abyss, just like the booster rocket of a spacecraft once its fuel was depleted. "Lisa, your English name reminds me of the nurse in Silent Hill." "Officer," he said. Consumed by hatred, her eyes gouged out, trapped in darkness, an inescapable fate. From the other nannies, Officer, he learned that Chenling had taken a baby, and he realized that time was running out for him. Once she left with the child, it would be like a grain of sand disappearing into the vast ocean. Moreover, the Jersey Devil organization was so large that retrieving them would take great effort. If the baby was sold abroad, it would be beyond their reach. Officer, he quickly called up a satellite map. Since the previous case showed no surveillance footage of the suspect on the streets, it indicated there must be an unknown backdoor and blind spots in the surveillance coverage. He soon pinpointed the location of the backdoor and saw a van parked there. He set out alone to find Chenling, while sending his subordinates to search the surrounding area. His team reported that there was no one in the van. They had caught a sniper not far away, who later confessed that the head of the organization had stationed him there to eliminate Chunling if she were in danger of being captured. Though they successfully captured Chunling, the head of the organization was still at large. From the distraught Chunling, Officer He learned about the organization's regular meeting points, which included an abandoned factory warehouse. He quickly led a team to surround the warehouse and break in. Inside, the organization leader and his 3 men were packing several babies into black bags with ventilation holes, arranging them onto the cargo shelves in a small van to be shipped to northern Myanmar. Officer He and his team stormed in, and the criminals immediately drew their handguns. After a brief gunfight, the leader's men were injured and lost their ability to resist. The leader stood in front of their guns, cradling a baby in one arm. "Give me a car."
Now.
The leader, with no way out, waved his gun and shouted. The baby, possibly waking up from the sedative's effect, opened its eyes wide and stared at the row of armed police officers in front of it. Officer He aimed his gun. Though he was confident he could hit his target, the leader was constantly moving and there was a risk of hitting the baby. His finger rested on the trigger, waiting for the right moment. "Did you hear me?" The leader shouted again when no one reacted, pointing the gun directly at the baby. The baby, sensing the danger, began kicking its legs and wriggling, slipping out of its bag. Now was the moment. As the baby slid lower, and the leader's gun barrel was no longer aimed at the child, Officer He pulled the trigger, hitting the leader's shoulder, the one holding the baby. The baby fell to the ground, and other officers quickly fired, bringing the leader down in a pool of blood. The medics approached and checked on the baby, confirming there were no major injuries. Officer He let out a long breath. It was finally over. Looking back, Officer He realized that Chunling's words had shaken him. If his son was really trafficked, then he would have to return him to his biological parents, and he would lose his beloved child. This world is one of balance. Some parents lose their children and are heartbroken, while others receive them with joy. The sadness and joy are never truly understood by one another. Sometimes, he thought about being selfish. Since fate had brought a son to him, why should it be so cruel to take him away? In the following week, the police, based on the confessions of Chunling and the leader's men, successfully dismantled the entire Jersey Devil organization. Mrs. Wei got her child back, and the police obtained all the data on the babies the organization had trafficked. That night, Officer He couldn't sleep at all. He and his wife discussed the situation throughout the night, with his wife crying like the flooded Nile River. In the end, they decided they had to know the truth. Early the next morning, his wife carefully wrapped a small lock of their son's hair in a tissue and handed it to him. During the long hours of waiting, he sat in his office chair, staring blankly at the computer screen. Anxiety consumed him, and his heart felt like it was about to burst from his chest. Just when he thought he couldn't bear it any longer, his phone buzzed with the results of the test. They didn't match. The DNA didn't match any of the parents in the database of stolen babies. Officer He sighed with relief. He felt like thawed pork, slumping back in his chair. The babies all looked alike. Maybe Chunling was mistaken, or maybe she was just trying to deceive him. Thankfully, it was all a misunderstanding. He eagerly called his wife to share the good news. She told him to come home early that evening because she was preparing a big meal. At that moment, a thought flashed through his mind, but he chose to ignore it. It wasn't impossible, but he didn't want to believe it. Since the heavens had given him the result, he chose to accept it. That thought was, what if Chunling was right? What if the hair his wife had given him wasn't their son's? But Officer He decided that from now on, he would never conduct another test. His son belonged to them alone. Even if the blood was different, their futures were intertwined in the same path, a bond etched deeply in their hearts, one that no one could take away.